Masechet Gittin, Daf Lamed Gimel. We're continuing on the theme of a husband nullifying an agent that he sent with a get. So we have a question: Hozer megaresh bo or eno hozer megaresh bo? A husband wrote a get, proper get, and he gave it to an agent and said, "Deliver this to my wife." And then he changed his mind, said, "You know what? I don't want him to deliver it." So he ran faster, stopped the agent, and said, "Don't deliver it to my wife." But then later on that day, he said, "You know what? I do want to give this get." Can he use the same get that he already wrote? Or, now that he nullified it, maybe the get is null and void, and he has to go and write a new one. That's the question. Rav Nachman amar chozer u'megaresh bo, Rav Sheshat amar eno chozer u'megaresh bo, v'hilchata kevatet Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman says you can use the same one, and the halacha is like Rav Nachman. Rav Sheshat disagreed and said, no, you cannot use the same one. Now we have a challenge. This challenge is actually from Kiddushin. The case is that a groom, gives a ring or whatever to the bride and says, but I don't want the Kiddushin to happen now. I want it to take effect in 30 days. Now, unlike Gittin, where a husband can give a get to his wife against her will, and it still is valid from the letter of the law, regarding Kiddushin, she has to be in agreement. You cannot marry someone against her will. And so she agrees at that point and says, okay, yes, I accept this ring and we'll be mikudeshet in 30 days. But then a few days later, she changes her mind and says, you know what? I'm not mikudeshet yet. And so now I changed my mind. I disagree. Rabbi Yochanan said in that case, she has a right to change her mind because it didn't take effect yet. And then she will not be mikudeshet in 30 days, rendering that act of kiddushin null and void. So the contradiction is that in the case of a get where the husband changes his mind and cancels the get, we said halachas like Rav Nachman, and you can use it again. But here, in the case of Kiddushin, when she cancels the Kiddushin, then it's canceled null and void. So what's the deal? Hachi hashta, and now we answer. So wait a second, you're comparing apples and oranges. Hatam dibur v'dibur hu, ate dibur matel dibur. V'hacha nehi debatle l'shlichuta de kita gufe mi ka batil. Regarding Kiddushin, both are acts of speech, and one act of speech can come and cancel another act of speech. I mean, it's true. There's also has to be an act, either giving a ring or a shtar or bi'ah. There has to be some act, but the point of the agreement is with speech, right? I accept it. She can say it, she can do something to show that she accepts it, and because it's based on her acceptance, and now she canceled her acceptance, so her mind can change her mind, and that's then it's gone, right? And it's null and void until he has to do another act of kiddushin if they want to restart their relationship. But regarding a get, the husband did not cancel the document. You can't cancel a document with words. He canceled the agent. He made an agent with words, right? Mr. Friedman, can you be my agent and take this to my wife? He says yes, he's going. Then he goes and says, Mr. Friedman, I withdraw your authority to act on my behalf. So now he's no longer an agent. So he canceled the agent. He didn't make the document, the get document, null and void, and therefore you can go ahead and use it again, and we resolve the contradiction. All right, we go on to the next part of the Mishnah that says, Barishona haya oseh. In the early days, their husband didn't have to overtake the agent or go to the wife. He can go into a betin and say, listen, I sent a messenger with a get, but I'm declaring to you that get is null and void. And if he does that before it reaches the wife, that would be fine. And then Rabban Gamliel Hazaken made a takana and said, no, husband is not allowed to do that anymore. Okay, so we're going to analyze this section. Itmar bifne kamahu mebatelo, Rav Nachman amar bifne shenayim, Rav Sheshat amar bifne shelosha. We just had a machloket between these very two Amoraim from Bavel, and so now they have another argument on this topic. So how many people does he have to be there? This is talking about before the takana, right? When one was allowed to do this, how many people would have to be there? Rav Nachman said only 2 people. Rav Sheshat said 3 people. Now Now, we're going to see. I mean, it says Bet Din in the Mishnah, so it seems like that would be right. So let's analyze. Rav Sheshat amar bifnei shelosha Bet Din katan. The Mishnah says you have to go to a Bet Din. The minimum Bet Din is 3 people, typically. But Rav Nachman amar bifnei shnayim lebet rename Bet Din karu lehu. But Rav Nachman says even 2 people can be called in certain circumstances a minimal Bet Din, and so therefore even 2 is enough. Rav Nachman says, where's a proof that 2 can be? Usually 2 people or 2 is witnesses, right? Not a bet din. Says, well, so what's my proof? Where do I see that 2 people can be called a bet din? Ditnan. We have a Mishnah in Masechet Shevi'it. This is regarding writing a pros bol. If you want your debts, you'll be able to collect the debts and that they not be canceled by Shevi'it. So you basically transfer the debt to the bet din, and their debts are not canceled, but you do need a bet din there. Now, how do you make a pros bol? The Mishnah says, Mosrani lifnechem, I am transferring to you or in front of you, peloni ufloni hadayanin shemakom peloni. I'm transferring my loans to you or in front of you, and then you name the judges, right? This judge, Yosef and Shimon, the judges in this place. Now, what you see here is there's only 2 people mentioned, right? There's only blanks for 2 people in this Mishnah, in the formula that you say, and yet they're called dayanim, so they are judges. So even 2 can be called judges, and the set of them be called a bet din. That's Rav Nachman's proof. Rav Sheshat, Rav Sheshat said that's not a proof. What, you think the reciter should be like a peddler? Just say extra words that are not needed. A peddler, he goes around and keeps repeating 2 for $1, 2 for $1, 2 for $1, right? He all day long is saying the same thing. And so now the memorizers, right, of the tradition, should they be like a peddler and keep saying that they have to say ploni ufloni hadayanin? We don't have to make it so long. We're just shortening a little, right? You get the point that you have to name all the judges and that are in front of you. But obviously it means 3 because it's a bet din. So that's Rav Sheshat's proof, counter to that proof. Amar Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman says, okay, you know what? I'll bring another proof that 2 people are in fact called the bet din. Ditnan hadayanin chotmin lemata or ha'edim. Still regarding the pros bol, that you write a document of pros bol and it's signed by the judges or by the witnesses. Now, why does it compare them? This is interesting because it's like a hekesh in a Torah when you say these 2 things are back to back. So the juxtaposition we learn something from. Here we're applying a hekesh type of methodology even to a Mishnah. So why is this put dayanim and edim next to each other? To teach you that they're the same. And just like witnesses can be 2, so too, for at least for this purpose and for maybe other purposes, 2 people can be considered judges and a bet din. Okay, that's his proof. Rav Sheshat, midi idia, hakidita. Rav Sheshat, that's not a proof. Each one is a separate phrase. It's telling you that a document of a pros bol can either be signed by judges, in which case you'd need 3, because 3 judges are a bet din, or they can be signed by witnesses, and witnesses would be 2 people, right? Who said you're comparing apples and oranges, and the laws for each are appropriate for their context. Doesn't mean everything's the same. Okay, lama li mitna dayanim, lama li mitna edim, and so if we're not comparing them to say that they're the same, then why bother mentioning both of them? Hakamashmalan de la shena katuv bilshon dayanim v'chatmei adim v'la shena katuv bilshon adim v'chatmei dayanim. The Mishnah. So even though we're rejecting the hekesh of Rav Nachman, we still want to learn something from the juxtaposition of them. And if it's not that that both of them can be 2, then we can learn actually something else from it, which is that it doesn't matter whether in the form you said it in the language appropriate to judges and then witnesses sign it, or the other way around, you wrote it as if witnesses and then judges signed it, right? Because in the beginning you'll say, we witnesses, right, witnessed this person that he did this pros bol. Okay, and even though it says language of witnesses, judges can sign it. Or if in the language of the document it says, we judges adjudicated this, and then witnesses sign it, that's still okay. And that's why both are mentioned back to back in the Mishnah. All right, good. Now we're going to see the continuation of this Amud is going to have a very nice structure, as we'll show. Mipnei tikun ha'olam. So now the reason for Rabban Gamliel Hazaken to say, you know what, you can't do this anymore, was for the betterment of the world. That's all the Mishnah says. It doesn't explain how does it make the world better that if the husband cannot retract his get in front of a bet din, he would have to go personally to the agent or to the wife. Mai mipnei tikun ha'olam. Rabbi Yochanan amar mipnei takanat mamzerim. Reish Lakish amar mipnei takanat agunot. Rabbi Yochanan explains that if she receives a get, and she'll assume that it's a valid get, right? This is a trustworthy agent, a valid get, and she will have no idea. How could she know that the husband in his city went to a bet din and canceled it? So she's going to assume that's a good get. She will go ahead and get remarried. She will have a child, and only after she has a child, she'll find out, oh, you know what? The husband had canceled the get, you were never divorced, and now this you committed adultery and your child is a mamzer. So we want to prevent that. Therefore, the husband has to go and say to the agent himself or to the wife herself, I canceled the get. That way she will know, oh, okay, I'm not going to rely on this get. This is a void, get is void, and she will not get remarried and avoid mamzerim. Okay, makes sense. Reish Lakish, however, says because of takanat agunot, that when a woman receives a get and receives it from an agent, she'll always worry that, wait, maybe he canceled it in front of a bet din. And so, you know what, maybe I can't remarry. And so, because she wants to avoid committing adultery and having a mamzer, so she won't get married in the first place. And now you're going to have agunot, deserted wives who are stuck. They are afraid to get remarried because maybe the get was no good. On the other hand, they are not currently married because they're not with their husband, because they did receive a get. And so now they're just stuck in limbo. And we want to avoid that. So really, Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish can actually kind of work together because they're two sides of the same coin. Either she gets married, relies on the get, and then risks having a mamzer, or she doesn't take a risk and remains single and alone. But both are bad situations. And so by making a takana that a husband cannot nullify a get in front of a bet din, then that avoids it, because if he nullifies it, he has to do it in a way that she will know for sure whether he did nullify it, and if he doesn't, if she doesn't hear about it, then she can assume that he did not nullify it. Okay, we're now going to try to line up the machloket that we just saw here between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish with the previous, these are two Amoraim from Eretz Yisrael, with the previous machloket between Rav Nachman and Rav Shashat about how many people one would have, the husband could have gone to before the takana in order to cancel it. So they're going to fit together. Rabbi Yochanan amar b'pnei takanat mamzerim, savar la k'Rav Nachman amar b'pnei shenayim, ubetre let lehu kala, v'hi lo sham'a v'lo yad'a, ve'azla umi naseba v'ika mamzerim. Rabbi Yochanan said the reason that Rabban Gamliel made the takana is because we're worried about mamzerim, and that would follow with Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman is actually a little later than Rabbi Yochanan, but the point is that these two work together, who said that the husband can go and say it in front of just two people. That counts as a bet din. And here's the problem. Even if two people, you say, is like a bet din, nevertheless, it doesn't have publicity. When you say something in front of three, then you can assume that will become public record, right? Like in the days of back in newspapers, there were certain transactions you had to do. You had to take out an ad in newspaper to say, right, this land is being auctioned off publicly. So the bet din would publicize certain things. That's if there's three. But when there's only two people, then the matter does not become publicized. So here's the problem. If there were three and it became publicized, then you wouldn't have a problem, because when the husband goes to the bet din, that'll become public knowledge. Very soon that news will travel to the woman, the wife, and she will not get remarried. And there'll be no problem mamzerim. Therefore, Rabbi Yochanan, who says we do worry about mamzerim, is because he follows the rule that even two people is enough, and therefore she will not hear that the husband canceled, and she will go ahead and get remarried and have a child, and that will produce a mamzer. So you see, because the original halacha before the takana was that he can cancel in front of two, there's no publicity, and that caused the problem mamzerim, and that's why Rabban Gamliel made the takana. That fits together. The other side also fits together. V'resh Lakish amar b'pnei takanat agunot savar la kerav sheshat amar b'pnei shelosha ubetel ta'it lehu kala v'sham'a v'yada v'lamin naseba v'takanat agunot hu de'ika. According to Resh Lakish, it's not because of mamzerim, even though I explained Resh Lakish and Bilchanan earlier as there being two sides of the same coin. The Gemara wants to separate them more and say that actually no, there's a machloket here. They are disagreeing with each other, and so here it means takanat agunot means something a little different than the way I explained it, and that is that Rav Sheshat is Resh Lakish, Rav Sheshat fit together, and really the husband would have to go to a betin of 3 people. And so therefore there is publicity about it, and then she will hear about it, and she will not get remarried. So we're not worried about her getting remarried and having a mamzed, but we are worried about her being an aguna. If the husband goes to a betin of 3 and cancels the get, so yes, she will know about it and she won't get tripped up by being mamazed, but then she'll be left stuck. She won't be able to get remarried, and she's not currently with her husband. She's legally married to her husband, but obviously they're not living together. So that's the definition of an aguna. Therefore, the purpose of Rabban Gamliel's takana was to prevent the husband from nullifying the get. Now, he has a legal right to do so. So yes, he can do it by overtaking the agent or running to the wife, but that's harder to do. So we want to prevent him from voiding it as much as possible, and therefore we're going to take away this easy way for the husband to nullify the get by just going to a local betin. He can't do that, and that way, once husband issues a get, it's more likely that he will not void it, and then she will be free to marry, and that's the point of the takana, and that would fit with Resh Lakish, who says even the original takana was in front of 3 people, so it was a call. So it's not that she's going to get tripped up and make a mistake and get remarried when she's not allowed to, but rather to help her to make sure that the husband doesn't void the get at all. All right, now Tenu Rabbanan bitelo mevutal dibrei Rabbi Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel omer eno yachol lo lebatelo velo losif al tenao shimken ma koach betin yafeh. We're about to see 2 machalokot between Rabbi Yehuda Nasi and Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel on this subject, and then we're going to talk about after and the rest of the daf which one does halacha follow. So let's keep them straight. This is the first machloket, and the question is here, let's say after the takana of Rabban Gamliel. Rabban Gamliel says a husband is not allowed to go to a betin and nullify it. Lechatechila, he shouldn't. But b'diavad, what if he does go ahead against the takana and nullify it? What's the status of the get? So Rabbi said, if the husband nullified the get in front of a betin, it is nullified, right? That's the basic letter of the law. Mideoraita, we make a takana that he's not allowed to go to a betin and nullify it, but if he does, then it is in fact the get is in fact nullified according to the Rabbi. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel omer eno yachol lo levatelo velo leosif al tenao shimken ma koach betin yafeh. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel disagrees and says he cannot nullify it. He cannot add another condition and say, oh, you know what, this get is only good if you pay me $1,000. He cannot change anything, because otherwise, what is the power of betin? The betin that makes a takana of Rabban Gamliel's betin that makes a takana, right? If a betin makes a takana, but then we say, oh, if you violate the takana, it's still okay, it's still valid. Well, that doesn't make sense, right? Because then the takana has no teeth, has no force. So therefore, if once the rabbis make a takana and say a husband cannot go to a betin and nullify it, then if he does go and nullify it anyway, what his action is itself is null and void, and the get goes through just fine. Okay, a really fundamental machloket here. But now we're going to ask, Omi ika midi demedoraita batel gita mishum makor betin yafeh sharenan eshet ish la'alma. A huge challenge against Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. Well, I understand your concern, but is there any case where on a deoraita level the get is batel, because from deoraita law, the husband can in fact go to a bet din and nullify the get. It works. And now you, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, because you're concerned about the authority of the bet din, right? What will people think about this bet din if they do something and then you can ignore it and there's no consequences? Because I understand this is a good concern, but because of a concern of the power of the bet din, you're going to override a deoraita and say that it's a good get, and then she'll go get remarried, and you're permitting an eshet ish, someone who is midoraita, married to the first husband, permitted to get remarried, right? How could this koch bet din override a deoraita law? And the answer is in kol de mekadesh adatad rabanan mekadesh vafke'in hu rabanan the kiddushin mineh. Famous statement. Yes, in fact, that is true, because whenever someone does kiddushin, they do it with the sages, with the will of the sages in mind, kind of like a condition. All right, when you say Haret Mikodesh Yadi, Kedat Moshe v'Yisrael, according to the law of Moshe, that's Deoraita. V'Yisrael includes all the sages that come after and interpret and explain the law, and therefore it's on that condition, it's under that rubric that the husband in the first place does kiddushin, and therefore if the rabbis declare that this kiddushin we decide is null and void, they can actually uproot the kiddushin retroactively. So that's the mechanism of how it works. When this husband goes to a bet, he sent a get with an agent. He goes to a bet din and says, I want to nullify that get. You're right. On the Doraita level, that get would be nullified, and therefore she would still be married. But you know what? The rabbis will say, okay, we'll one-up you, husband, because you went against the court, the takana, and when it did that, we can have the power to uproot and say, the kiddushin you originally did when they were first married, whatever, 10, 20 years ago, we uproot that kiddushin and say that kiddushin was null and void. You were never married in the first place this whole time. And so therefore she doesn't even need a get. She can just go ahead and remarry without having to worry. All right, very powerful statement. Ravina tells Rav Ashi, I understand this answer that we just said here, if he does kiddushin with money, because money, the rabbis have power over money. We say hefker bet din hefker. The rabbis can say that money that you gave her, we declare that it was not hers, and therefore she never received the coin, she never received the ring, and so the rabbis have that power, and they can easily uproot kiddushin in that way. But what if he does kiddushin with bi'ah? That's one of the three ways that he has bi'ah with her, and he says this bi'ah is hadet mekudesh li, right? Bi'ah Zo. Well, what about that? You can't. What power would they have to undo an act of bi'ah through which they did kiddushin? And the answer is yes, even that. Shavyu Rabbanan be'ilato be'ilat zinut. The rabbis can now declare and define that act of bi'ah. We decide retroactively was not an act of kiddushin. Yes, the act was there, but we say that was just a promiscuous act, right? You acted promiscuously. You were with a single person, but it was not kiddushin, and therefore you were never married, and therefore she doesn't even need the get. So don't try to go to a bet din and uproot the get against the takana, because we will make sure that she is free to marry one way or the other, and that defends Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, that the takana is very powerful. Good. Now that was one machloket between Rabbi and Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. Now we're going to see a second one. Tanu Rabbanan. Amad la'asara kitvu get li'ishti. Yachol levatel ze shelo bifnei ze. Dibre Rabbi. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel omer, eno yachol levatel ela ze bifnei ze. A man says to 10 people, write a get for my wife, right, and give it to her. Now, he didn't specify which of them, so any of them can do it. You don't need all of them. One person who knows how to write, he can write the get. 2 people will be witnesses. The other 7 don't have to do anything. So any of the group can go ahead and write it. Now, what if he changes his mind, the husband? Now, if all 10 are there, certainly that would be good. But what if not all 10 are there, right? Only 4 people are there, and he says, listen, to these 4, I don't want you guys to write the get anymore. I changed my mind. Can he do that? Can he stop these people 4 and without the presence of the others? According to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, Yes, he can do that. According to the Ben Shammai Ben Gamaliel, he cannot do that. He has to have all 10 people, get them all together again, then nullify it in front of all of them. If he tries to nullify it in front of only 4 of them, his directive is not nullified, and and they can go ahead and continue to write the get. Okay, what is the essence of this machloket? They're arguing about whether if a sender, a husband in this case, invalidates part of his messengership, is the whole thing invalidated, or can you nullify even just a part of it? So application in this case, if he tells 4 people, don't write the get anymore, does that nullify the entire thing? And now, even if he said these 4 people, even if another group of 3 people goes ahead with the get, it's all nullified, because if you nullify part of them, then they're all nullified. Or not. Maybe if you nullify 4 people, those 4 people can't write it, but the other 6 people can continue to write it. That's the question. So the bi sabad aidut shabat la miksata lo batla kula viazle hanach katvi viyahavi lichtevu veletvu. The Yehuda Nasi says it's permitted for the husband to say to 4 people, hey, I changed my mind and I don't want you guys to write it, because he thinks that by nullifying part of them, it does not nullify the rest of them, and therefore the rest of them who aren't there and they don't know that the husband changed his mind, well, their agency is not canceled anyway. Only those 4 are canceled. The other 6, they can continue. And if they go ahead and write a get and deliver it, that get will be valid. And so there's no harm that can come, because the get will be valid. She'll receive the get, she'll remarry and live happily ever after. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel savad aidut shebatla miksata batla kula v'hanach layadeh ve'azla ve'katvi yahveh ve'shadu eshet ish le'alma. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, however, thinks that if the husband goes ahead in front of 4 people and say, hey, my directive is nullified, then it's nullified for all 10, even the 6 that aren't there. But those 6 won't know that the husband changed his mind, and they're going to go ahead and write it and give it to her, and she will think she's divorced and remarry, and that will be a big problem. And therefore, the Ban Shimon ben Gamliel says, we do not allow the husband to take back, to nullify it, unless all 10 are there. If all 10 are there, then they'll all hear the message, and nobody will write and give it to her. So it's basically the same idea as the takana of the Ban Gamliel, right? We don't want any situation where the husband can nullify a get or nullify the messenger without the messenger knowing, and then he'll continue. So because he thinks that the messengers will be canceled, the other 6 who aren't there, and they will continue, that's the problem. The B said, if he invalidates some of them, only those are invalidated that are there, and the other ones can continue, and so there is no problem. So this is the second machloket. Now, this is one way of interpreting the machloket that they're arguing about this case, about this law of if you nullify part, does it nullify all? And the Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says yes, it does nullify all. But another way to understand Rashbag is as follows: kasabar mileta demit abeda be'ape asara siricha be'asara lemishlefa. Or Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel actually thinks that everyone agrees that if you nullify part of it, the rest of them are not nullified. And so if you nullify only 4, the other 6 can continue, and that would be a valid get if they go ahead and continue. So that's not the problem. Rather, the reason why the Ban Shimon ben Gamliel says that the husband should not do that is because he cannot do that. It doesn't work. Anything that you made in front of 10 people has to be revoked in front of 10 people. And if he tries to revoke it in front of less than that, it's not a full revocation, and it's not revoked at all. And any of them can go ahead and continue to write the get. And so it's a different reason. It's not that it might come to a problematic situation. It's just that it's not a revocation. You did it with 10, you have to stop it with 10 also. Okay, now, ibayelehu. Kulechem mahu. Now, what if a case where the same as before, except that the husband, instead of saying to the 10 people, write a get, he says, all of you write a get. And in that case, the law is that all 10 of them have to be involved. All 10 have to sign on the get, right? You can't have only 3 people, 1 write and 2 sign it. All 10 have to be present and involved. So what about in that case? Would they still disagree? It depends on the reasoning, one of the two reasonings that we just had for Rashbag. Tamad Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel mishum dekasavar העדות שבטלה מקצתה בטלה כולה, והנה כיוון דאמר להו כולכם לא מסו כתבי ויהווה. On the one hand, if the reason for Rashbag is because he thinks that by nullifying 3 or 4 of them, you nullified all of them, and then there'll be a problem because the other 6 won't know, and then they'll continue and write the get and give it to her, and she will get remarried not knowing that it was nullified. If that's what you were worried about in the previous case, you don't have to worry about that in this case, because he said all of you, so they all have to be present. So they're all going to come together. Even if I tell 4 people, you guys are canceled, and the rest of them will be canceled, when the rest of them try to go and write it, they're going to have to sign it from all 10, and they're going to find the other 4, and those 4 will say, oh no, he canceled it. We're not signing it. Right? And then that way the get will never be written. And so in that case, if that's the reasoning, then Rashbag would agree that if he says kulechem, then he can nullify it, even if he nullifies it only in front of some of them. או דיומא תמא רבן שמעון גמליאל משום דקסבר כל מילתא דמתעבדה בפה 10 צריכה ב10 למשלפה ואל כך אפילו כולכם נמה. Or on the other hand, if we follow the second reason, that the Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel's basis for saying that the husband cannot do it is because there's a basic requirement that if you perform something in front of 10, you have to revoke it in front of all 10. All 10 have to be there to nullify it. So then it doesn't matter if he says kulechem or not kulechem. If he revokes it in front of only 4 of them, it's not a revocation because all 10, even though it won't lead to any problem, it's just a fundamental obstacle in the revocation, and so it is not revoked. And then they would go ahead and continue. They could go ahead and continue to write it. And so the reasoning that we apply for Rashbag in the case where he doesn't say kulechem will make a difference of a result in the case where he does say kulechem. Good. Now, Tashema, Amar l'shnayim, tenu get li'ishti, yachol levatel ze shelo bifnei ze, dibrei Rabbi. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel omer, eno yachol levatel ela ze bifnei ze. And so now we're going to see something interesting, that, and another parallel braita, and it's in the Tosefta too, we have the same machloket, not in the case of regarding 10, but regarding 2. So the husband told 2 people, here, give this get to my wife. He can nullify in front of just one of them, right? Later on, she's only one of them. I nullify it. That's permitted, according to the B. The B also said he can nullify in front of some of the 10. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says, no, he has to have both of those messengers there in front of him and nullify it in front of both of him. He cannot nullify it in front of just one of them. So let's see. What is interesting? Now, 2 is the same as the case of 10 when he said kulechem, because in the case of 2, one can't do it without the other, right? You need 2 people to sign on a get, and therefore, really, he could tell one person, I'm nullifying it, and we won't have to worry that the other one will, on his own, sign a get, because he can't do it on his own. The other guy is going to have to look out for the other friend, the other messenger, and say, hey, come here, let's sign this together. And when he does that, the other guy will say, oh no, he canceled it, right? He told me he canceled it, I'm not signing. And so you don't have to worry that she'll get remarried improperly. Rather, we can prove from this that the reason of Rashbag is actually because if you do it in front of 10, you have to nullify in front of 10. If he makes the agents with 2 people, then he has to nullify it in front of both people. So we see that is actually the reasoning of Rashbag. And so in the case of the 10, both when he doesn't say kulechem, both reasonings can work, but in the case of 2, we see that only one of the reasons can work. So in fact, everyone agrees that if you nullify part, You don't nullify all the rest of them. But the question is, does it work? Can you nullify if you made it in front of 10? Can you or 2? Do you need all 10 or all 2 to be there? Rashbag says yes, and Rabbi Yehuda Nasi says no. Good. Amar Rav Asher I ba'adeh ketiva hachinameh. Rav Asher says, listen, I would agree with your proof if you assume that we're talking about witnesses to sign it, right? He told these 2 guys, hey, I want you to sign the get. But that's not the case here. See, he said tinu get lishti. He didn't say chitmu get lishti or kitvu get lishti. These 2 people are witnesses, are only adeh holacha. They are witnessing the delivery, or they're delivering it themselves, in which case actually you don't need both of them. He's saying to 2 people, deliver the get, but really only one of them can deliver it. You don't need both of them to go. Either one of them can deliver it without the other. And therefore, we're back to square one. And in fact, we can't tell what Rashbag's reasoning was, because here we would have a concern that she'll remarry improperly, because if he tells one of these 2 witnesses / agents, I'm nullifying it, the other one won't hear about it, the other one will take the get and deliver it, and not knowing that the husband had nullified it. And so that would be the reason, and this would follow the reasoning of, if you cancel one part, it does cancel the other. And when the husband tells one guy, I'm canceling you, the other one is canceled, but he doesn't know about it, and that would be the problem. And in fact, what Rav Asher says actually makes sense in the context of the Braita, the Katani Sefa. The continuation of that Braita about the 2 witnesses says that if the husband appointed each one separately to be whatever they're going to be, an agent to write it or to deliver it. If he appointed them separately, then he can nullify them separately. Only if he appoints them together, then he has to nullify both of them. So that's the end of the Braita. Let's analyze. If you're talking about witnesses, we call them witnesses, really talking about agents to deliver it, then that makes sense, because either one can deliver it without the other, and therefore it makes sense that he can appoint one and you deliver it, and then he says no another, or you deliver it, so either one can deliver it. In that case, he can nullify them separately. But if you say that he's talking about witnesses to sign the document, can they join together if they were appointed separately? We have a tradition that 2 witnesses cannot join together unless they are both there together. This is like witnesses for see a murder, and one sees the beginning of the murder and leaves. One sees the end of the murder, but they're not there together. They can't testify together. They have to join as a group. They can't join as a group unless they were a group the whole time. And so here too, it can't be we're talking about witnesses to sign it, because they would have to be appointed and work together. And here, he's appointing them separately. Therefore, it's evident that it is talking about ayedeh holacha, as Rav Asher said. And therefore, there is no proof about which way, that there is no proof that the reasoning of Rabban Shimon and Gamliel is the second reason that you need everyone to be there. But then we conclude the opposite. Not necessarily. Maybe it is a good proof. Could be that the author of this Baraita follows Rabbi Yoshua ben Korcha, who says that separate witnesses can, in fact, join together to testify. And so here in the Sefa of this Baraita, it could, in fact, be that where you're still talking about Edeh Kitiba, he appointed each one separately. He nevertheless can, they nevertheless can, in fact, join together. And so it could be that this is, in fact, talking about Edeh Kitiba, the witnesses that were going to sign it together. And since it's talking about witnesses that have to sign it together, so they will both have to sign it. It's like a case of kulechem, and therefore the reasoning of Rabban Rashbag, if we accept that, this is following Rabbi Yoshua ben Korcha here, then we can prove that the reasoning of Rashbag is in fact that if you, in order to revoke, you need all of the messengers to be there, so that you can revoke in front of all of them. If not, the revocation is not valid. And according to that, everyone agrees that if you nullify some of them, then you can nullify, then it does not nullify all of them. All right. Now, next, we're going to try to figure out who does the halacha follow. Amar Rav Shemuel bar Yehuda, Shemait mineh de Rabbi Abba tarteh. Chada kerebi vechada keraban Shimon ben Gamliel. Velo yadana he kerebi vehe keraban Shimon ben Gamliel. Rav Shemuel bar Yehuda says, I heard two rulings from Rabbi Abba, and I know in one of the rulings of these two machlokot that we had before, he said halacha is like Rabbi. But in one of them, he said halacha is like Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. But I don't remember which one of the two previous machalokot did he rule like Rabbi, and which one did he rule like Rashbag. All right, and again, the two machalokot were that if the after the takana of Rabban Gamliel Hazaken, if the husband goes ahead and to a betin and nullifies the get after he sends the agent, Rabbi said b'di avad, it's a valid get because that's the oraita law. Rashbag said imken makor betin yafeh, so it's nullified. That was the first. And second machloket was if he tells 10 people to write a get, and then he cancels some of them. Rabbi says those 4 guys are canceled. The rest of them are fine and can continue. And Rashbag says he may not cancel with only some of them there. All of them have to be present in order to cancel. So now we're going to try to figure out which hala of these two machalokot follows Rabbi and which one follows Rashbag. We know it's 1 and 1. Amar Rav Yosef, Nechze Anan, Techi ata Rav Dimi, Amar Maaseh ve'asa Rabbi kedibrei chachamim. Amar lefanav Rabbi Perata, beno shel Rabbi Elazar ben Perata, ben beno shel Rabbi Perata hagadol. Im ken ma koch betin yafeh, ve'chazar Rabbi ve'asa keraban Shimon ben Gamliel. We have a tradition from Rav Dimi when he came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel. He said there was an actual case, and Rabbi followed Chachamim, meaning he said that the get is still valid, and then Rabbi Perata said to Rabbi, and Rabbi Perata happens to be the son of Rabbi Elazar, the son of Perata, who is the grandson and the grandson of Rabbi Perata. You see, he named Rabbi Perata after his grandfather, Rabbi Perata Hagadol. So you see that they were all Sfaradim. Then he said to Rabbi, says, wait, if you're going to say that the get is valid, then what is the power of Betin? Right? Betin can make a takana, and people just don't follow it, and it's fine. And then Rabbi changed his mind, and he followed Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. We can see from this story that in the first machloket, halacha is like Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, that if the husband tries to nullify in front of Betin, his action is invalid and the get will still go through. Since the first machloket follows Rashbag, that means the second machloket, if he tries to nullify some of the agents without the others present, then that is valid. They are canceled, and the rest of them can continue. Then in that case, in that machloket, halacha is like Rabbi, and we're gonna double down and see another proof that this is the same lineup. V'af Rabbi Yoshia demin Usha savar chada kerebi v'chada keraban Shimon ben Gamliel. Rabbi Yoshia from Usha also thinks that we have 1 and 1. Halacha like Rabbi in one and like Rashbag in the other. Because this sage Rabbi Yoshia ben Usha, we have had 5 sages, elders, sitting in front of him. Now this certain case came, a husband came in front of him, and he adjudicated and said that we can extract the get from him against his will. There are certain cases when the husband does certain things that the betin can actually make him, force him to give a get even though he doesn't want to. And so he said that. And Amarlan, Zilu itmoru v'kitbu la. And so at that point, the husband said, okay, fine, write the get. I guess they were beating him up or whatever they were doing. And he said, write the get. Now, the 5 of us were there, so we were all authorized as agents to write and deliver the get. Then, at that point, Rabbi Yoshia said, hey, you guys, all you 5, go and hide. Why go and hide? So that the agent won't find you and cancel the get, right? Because now, it's going to take some time. And so we're not going to keep him in jail here. So we're going to let him go. If he finds you, he can say, I want to cancel the get. We don't want that to happen. So go into hiding so that he can't find you. It's kind of funny. Okay. It's like a hide and seek game. Now, if you follow Rabbi, ki mitamere may have, if they hide, how does that help? After all, this husband, he can go to another bet din somewhere else and say, I declare that the get that I authorized, I now say is not authorized anymore. Because according to the B, even though he's not allowed to do that, because it's a takana, but b'diavad, if he cancels it, the get is canceled. And so this story would not make sense according to the B, because hiding wouldn't help. They'd actually have to keep him in jail there. Rather, it must be that in the first machloket, the halacha follows Rashbag, that it is, in fact, cancel, that if he tries to cancel it, it doesn't work, right? And the get goes ahead and is delivered just fine. So he can't go to a bet din. The only thing the husband could do is to find the agents. And that's why he says to go and hide. Okay, so the first machloket surely is like Rabbi, according to Rabbi Yoshia. Now, what about the other machlok? Wait a second, maybe according to Rabbi Yoshia, both of them follow Rashbag. The second one, machloket too. Well, in that case, then why would they have to hide? Let them just go and separate. Because according to Rashbag, in the second machloket, he has to cancel, if he wants to cancel these 5 agents, he has to cancel them all together. They have to all be together. So they don't have to hide. They can just each go to a separate room, to a separate place. And then if the husband goes and cancels this one, the other 4 aren't there. If he cancels the next one, the other 4 aren't there. He won't be able to cancel them, even if they're in plain sight, if they are in different buildings. So they wouldn't have to hide. Rather, it must be that in the first case, yes, halacha was like Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, as we established, but in the second case, halacha is actually like Rabbi. And if they didn't hide, but only separated, Rabbi said he can go track one down and say, you're canceled. Then go to the next place, the other guy's house, and you're canceled. And he could do that to each one separately, and then they would all be canceled, and this would be a problem. Therefore, it's not enough for them to separate. They actually have to hide, and that this is the so we can conclude that according to the Yoshia also halacha is like Rashbag in the first machloket and like Rabbi in the second machloket. Now, Rava Amar Rav Nachman halacha Rabbi bishtehen. However, Rava named Rav Nachman disagrees and says halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda Nasi in both of them. Even in the first one, he would say, well, everybody said Rabbi halacha is like Rabbi in the second instance, but he would say halacha is like Rabbi in the first case. And if b'di'avad the husband goes ahead and gets the takana and nullifies the get, the nullification would be valid and the get would be nullified. So halacha kirivshtem. Velet le Rav Nachman ma koch betin yafeh. Now we ask, according to Rav Nachman, he doesn't hold of the principle that we have to uphold the power of the betin, right? That was Rashbag's counter argument. Is if you're going to say that the husband can go ahead and nullify the get against the takana, then what's the point of the power of betin? So Rav Nachman doesn't care about that, and he doesn't follow Rashbag, and instead follows Rabbi. We have a contradiction. V'hamar Rav Nachman amar Shemuel yetomim sheba'u lachlok b'nichsei avihen betin ma'amidin lahen apotropos uborin lahen chedek yafeh higdidu yecholin limchot. Rav Nachman himself said that if a father dies and leaves small minor sons, so the minors they don't have enough da'at to know how to split the inheritance, and so the bet din will appoint for them apotropos, an agent, to plead on their behalf, and you have one agent for each of the minor children, and they'll decide among themselves. Each one will be like a lawyer on behalf of his client, and then says, okay, I want this part's good. They have to split it up so that it will be fair for each of them. So the bet din is appointing these stewards, so therefore this is the power of bet din. And yet Rav Nachman said when they grow up, up, they can protest and say, hey, my apotra post court appointed did this, but it wasn't fair, and I protest and I want a redistribution. They can make a redistribution and say, what the Bet Din did, I reject. Now, Rav Nachman Dideh Amad Higdilu En Yachol Licholin Limchot Dimken Ma Koach Bet Din Yafeh. But in that case, Rav Nachman actually disagreed with the first statement, right, and said that when they grow up, they cannot go against the Bet Din, because otherwise, Ma koach Bet Din yafeh. What's the point of the Bet Din? What's the power of the Bet Din? If they appoint stewards, they divide the inheritance, and then when they grow up, they say, oh, we don't care how they divided it, we're going to do it ourselves. It makes the Bet Din look weak, right? That they made this thing, and then no one follows it anymore. So in this case of the Yitomim, Rav Nachman does follow the principle of Ma koach Bet Din, but over here, he said halacha is like Rabbi, who doesn't care about ma koach Bet Din, and he says, oh, Doraita law, the get is no good. Then that's it. We follow the Doraita, and he nullified the get. The get is nullified. So how do we deal with this contradiction? And the answer is hatam amona hacha isura. In the case of Yitomim, we're talking about monetary matters, and so monetary matters, those are less important relatively. And there, we're going to prop up the honor of the court. The court said, you get this piece of land, you get that piece of land, and so that's it. The court's decision is final, because otherwise, what's the point of the power of a court? So for monetary reasons, they are the final say. But when it comes to isura, a prohibition, where who will go and be with someone else and have a child, this is much more serious. In that case, even though the authority of the court is at stake, nevertheless, we have to follow the basic Doraita law. And since on the Doraita level, the husband can go and nullify the get in front of a Bet Din, even though the rabbi said they shouldn't, but on Doraita, he can. And therefore, we have to follow the Doraita. For a prohibition, the Koach Bet Din is not as important as following the fundamental Doraita law. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen v'Amen.